Assalamu alaikum. I hope you are doing well your side. I'm doing very well. A little bit of a cold that's just busy, that I'm just busy getting out of. You'll still hear my voice being a bit different. But I hope you are well. Alhamdulillah. We praise Allah. There is none but Him. We worship Him, we adore Him, we obey Him, and we seek His pleasure and His satisfaction with us. So, my friends, I want to quickly raise an issue, and I think I might have to do about 2 or 3 videos in a row here. And by the way, if you look in the top left-hand corner there, you'll see I've time-stamped my videos so that if you need to, from now on, look at the video that happened before or after, you can just check the timestamp. But what am I going to raise in this video? You see, I don't like speaking about myself and who I am and what I've accomplished and so on, but I need to state it from time to time because there are people who operate on that level. There are people who operate on the level of what do you know. And let me remind you again that I'm almost hitting 60, so I've been around for a while. I've got plenty of life experience. I grew up through a revolution in this country. I was the generation. My generation was the generation that led the revolt against white supremacy, against the apartheid system. I myself ended up locked up on a number of occasions. Through all those experiences, sitting in my jail cell, I fell in love with the Qur'an because that's all I managed to get my hands on was the Qur'an. After a while, not immediately. I read the Qur'an there already. When I experienced the hatred, the violence, the anger of the oppressor, I sought solace in my beliefs, in my religious beliefs. And after that, when we changed the country, we were unfortunately duped into accepting a government that was pro-West, that was extremely ultra-liberal in its leaning, that was a completely communist system. And I'm not anti-socialist, but I'm anti-communist, because socialism simply means putting people first, being people-centered, or having the interests of people as the central focus. But communism means making the individual disappear. And I'm not a communist. I've since forever, and I've never been part of a movement that has supported communism also. So we've never been in the ruling party that is currently governing. But I'm digressing a bit. And I've got this problem of digressing because I've got so much that I could share with you. But my life was always completed. I was spiritually completed by my religious philosophy. And I ended up becoming very interested in religion also. So my first tendency was to be an activist, a social activist, to become a soldier, from where I had to run operations as a soldier under command from those cells that were conducting a war against the system. Then I became a religiously interested person, because after the overthrow of the government in 1994, the settlement, the so-called peace settlement, what else could a soldier do but become more spiritual, become more religious? And so I had already the previous few years spent time in the Middle East, in the country Egypt, where I tried to immerse myself more into the religious understanding of Islam. And so I, at some point, realized that there is a disconnect between the way that I see Islam being practiced and what I see in the Qur'an. But I thought, look, who am I to question such a big deal thing? I'm nobody. I'm just one person. I'm less than a grain of sand on the seashore. And so I just thought that, you know what, Islam is like this big thing. People believe what they like. There's a whole hadith story. There's like Salafists and Hanafis and Shafis and whoever. And we just all have to find a little space there. But what I didn't realize was that there is a form of fascism in mainstream Islam where they actually disallow you from allowing you to become a fulfilled person within your reading of the Quran. There is a fascism. And it wasn't long before, I'll give you some examples where we would, for example, go to a very poor African township. It's like a very undeveloped village kind of setup, And I would go there and do extra math classes for the learners. And we would, have these food campaigns. Before the overthrow of the apartheid system, it was illegal to do that. And we would do that and risk being arrested, right? So you couldn't enter a impoverished, designated black zone. They call it a township here. But we went nevertheless, and you had to get special permission from the authorities, and get into these zones with that special. It's sort of like it's not a reserve. It's not what you would see as a reserve in the US, because the reserve is a fairly, from what I've seen only in movies, is that, and I've watched it looks like there's a lot of poverty, but not the level of dehumanization that we have here in our townships. Here we have now, it wasn't that bad, but we have drug abuse, we have alcoholism, we have social problems, we have all sorts of massive problems in those black townships, right? And so at some point, when you're a Muslim and you look at the verses of the Quran where it speaks about those who do not encourage the feeding of the poor, those who do not look after the interests of the orphans, those who abandon the weak and the oppressed. The Quran makes mention, if you read the Quran, you'll see that these ideas come up over and over. So when we went into that program of supporting, going in, helping where we could, there were even a number of those people in the townships that became Muslim at one stage, and we had a Jama'ah of 10, 20, there's still communities of, South African townships, or let me use the word that people will understand, black African townships, are not Muslim in South Africa, right? As you go north of the equator, the black African people, or the people with the darker skins, are Muslim by and large, right? Excluding Kenya. But if you look at Ghana, Nigeria, all of these countries, even north of Mozambique, it's mostly Muslim. Not so in South Africa. Islam is not a big factor here. And so it was very sort of encouraging when some of those people became Muslim. And so a community of Islam started there. But it wasn't long, and this is the point I want to make. It wasn't long before the officialdom, the clergy, the Muslim officials, and these guys are the product of generations of Indian, Malay intermarriage, right? And I would be a very typical specimen of what a Cape Town Muslim would look like. It's a Malay Muslim, sometimes European mix, maybe a little bit of African, Khoisan, the indigenous, the original Aboriginal people here are the Khoi. And so the Muslims would be a mix, a blood mixed of all of those people. And so it wasn't long before the top guys in the local Muslim fraternity, the society, the community, clamped down on us, called us ugly names, communists, and whatever they could brand us, they branded us. And we were called into meetings where we were literally castigated and slandered and smeared and told that we are a threat to the Muslim community. Now remember, we're talking of a time when I wasn't saying or doing anything weird. I mean, I wrote a book. I wrote a little booklet on hadith, believe me. It's titled From the Sunnah. I might have a copy here still. I wrote a hadith booklet in which I compiled a number of hadith, beautiful, and translated it also. And I was actually given some credit for those hadiths. Of course, I chose the hadiths to advance the position that we wanted to promote, and that was the uplifting of the oppressed, the support of the hungry and the marginalized. So I wrote that hadith book, and it was to encourage the right behavior, trying to find hadith that were supporting what we were doing. But we were ostracized, my friends, from the word go. The people did not like what we were doing. Doing things that are outside of their orthodox mainstream Islam is just a damn irritation for them. They don't like it one bit. At one stage, we also we started taking up a bit of a belligerent attitude, because we thought that, look, these guys are opposing everything. Like, I remember I was very small, and this is before I became really active. My close friends and brothers, and we're a family who've always been involved in this type of revolutionary awakening type of Islam, you see. Once they had this massive rally, it was called a Hajj and freedom rally, I believe. And it drew massive amounts of people. Of course, not Muslims, mostly non-Muslims. But the theme was Hajj. They incorporated the idea of Hajj into this event. And we had, I'm not sure, I know it was a massive crowd, right? They all came, they pitched. And it was a cultural event, so there was some African cultural stuff going on also. People were beating the drums, and some were dancing, and it was a really popular event. And the problem is that these Muslims, they drove past and they saw that what is going on here is completely antithetical to their beliefs. There's music. I think they saw one or two guys smoking a weed, a slow boat or a weed cigarette also outside. And that was completely, that sort of like, they could not live with us doing that under the name of Islam. And the very next day, or a few days later, they marched into, my brothers were then, I'm the youngest of a number of brothers, and they all fairly much older than me. To give you an example, my next brother older than me is 8 years older than me, so you can imagine. They marched into their houses. At that time, they were officials and they just demanded the official books and whatever they had of the official Muslim community, the Jama'as they call it. And they were expelled summarily. They were relieved of their positions. And why I'm telling you these things is that Islam, the traditional Orthodox Islam, we are not the fascists. We were trying to make Islam meaningful. We're trying to bring the message of the Qur'an back home, not only to ourselves, but to all people, whether they are existing Muslim or non-Muslim. We are their targets. They hate it if you try to make Islam meaningful. And they worship power. They worship power. Because what happened is, after the new government took over, the ultra-liberal, atheist African National Congress, whom I never ever supported. We were in the revolution, in the struggle, but we did it from other angles. There were other organizations also in that struggle, like the Pan-Africanist Congress, the Zanian People's Organization, and these were movements led sometimes by priests, by people in the in the clerical clergy, Christian clergy, were leading these movements sometimes. So we prefer to be with those movements than with a communist, atheist ANC. And, we worked together. I wouldn't say we're enemies, but I worked with him. I mean, we went on common missions. We would go on a common mission with him. So I'm not going to say that we were... The point I'm trying to make for you in this video is that we are not the fascists. We are the people that are trying to make sense of our deen, make sense of our Qur'an, to make it work for us in our living experience. And that is the point of Islam. Isn't the point of Islam that you should be able to draw strength, you should be able to flourish in whatever you are doing by drawing from the Quran? If you are living in a society that is post-revolutionary, that is scientific, that is focused on human advancement, whatever you want to call that, in perfecting technology, science, healing, travel, space travel, whatever. Islam is there to catapult, to energize that zeitgeist. You see, the zeitgeist, or the reigning spirit and ethos in your society, can draw from the Quran no matter where you are. And that is the problem that these guys is. They are trying to impose the zeitgeist, the social and political and intellectual ethos or spirit of the year 700. They are trying to impose that zeitgeist onto you now. And they really convinced that they can create a beautiful, successful world by preaching that nonsense. You see, so in this video, I just want to say that fascism is Islam as it is currently preached. My experience is that they are fascist. They will justify killing you. They will justify hurting you. They will justify slandering you. It's all things that they can use. And the only thing it reminds me of is the way that the Prophet was treated by the Ahlul Kitab, or the way that Satan, Iblis, the arch enemy, the way he treated Adam. You see, the Prophet told Iblis, respect Adam, accommodate him, make provision for him. And he said, no, I cannot make provision for him because I'm better than him. Ana khayru minhu. That religious supremacy, that arrogance is what will drive them all in hordes towards the burning fire of hell. And we will die, whether they kill us or whether we die naturally, but we die with a smile on our face that we were here to serve God, to make sense of His words, not the words of Bukhari, not the words of Abu Hurairah, scoundrels. We are here to make sense of His word, capital His H. The word that was officially revealed, sanctioned, conduited via a messenger, Muhammad alayhi salam. That word is the word that we regard as sacred. And so let them throw their stones, let them shoot, let them ostracize, let them diminish you, let them slander you. Their works will come to none. As the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam had to face that same slander, murder, assassinations from the Bani Israel, from the Ahlul Kitab of his time, we will face them and we will move on without fear. Walhamdulillah.